Good morning, everyone, and welcome to Empty Cloud Monastery. Apologies for starting late. We were having issues with the Wi-Fi, so thank you for your patience. Before we start on the suttas today, which will be Samyutta Nikaya 15.11 and Samyutta Nikaya 15.12, we'll pay homage to our original teacher, Shakyamuni Buddha, and the reason why we are all gathered here today. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Buddhang dhammang sanghang namasami. So if you would like to read along with me as I go over these suttas, there are links to them in the description. Usually I use Bhante Sujato's translations, but I prefer Ajahn Jeff's in this case. So we will be reading from his today. So I pulled them up. So first, we'll start with the Dukkata Sutta, Samyutta Nikaya 15.11, Fallen on Hard Times. At Savatthi, there the Blessed One said, "From an inconstruable beginning comes transmigration." So this is the cycle of rebirth, samsara. "A beginning point is not evident, though beings hindered by ignorance and fettered by craving are transmigrating and wandering on. When you see someone who has fallen on hard times, overwhelmed with hard times, you should conclude, we too have experienced just this sort of thing in the course of that long, long time." So there is a lot packed into this little paragraph, and it is extremely applicable in terms of our day-to-day practice. I often hear this sutta mentioned, but there's not too many instances I'm aware where the person talking about it mentions the number. And it pairs nicely with the next one, which is about happiness. But staying with this one, um, one way that you can think about this is sometimes people can get condescending with their practice. Like, I'm practicing so well, I'm having such a great time. These people are just suffering because they're not practicing well. Or another way that people might look at it is a way of misusing karma. You see this in India, where people are like, oh, those people deserve whatever they're going through. They did bad deeds in the past, so they should suffer from it now. That's not my problem. And depending upon someone's disposition, there are so many other flavors in which someone is capable of looking down on somebody else that is having a hard time. They could do the whole blaming game instead of trying to support them and helping change the conditions for the better, even if what they can do themselves is limited. At the very least, you don't have to harm them, even with your own mental actions, because the way that you think about somebody affects the way that you treat them. So if you're looking at somebody that has fallen on hard times and you are being condescending, you are looking down on them, you are judging them in an unbeneficial way, since judgment does have a skillful means of being used in the path, then you're not only harming them, you're also harming yourself. So this is something you can reflect on whenever you see somebody in that sort of position. Another angle, if this isn't something that you personally struggle with, that you can approach this, is as a way to cultivate samvega. So right now, you might be comfortable, you might have a roof over your head, your belly may be full 3 times a day, or however many times a day you decide to eat, less or more. You may have warm clothes. You might live in a situation that is safe and you don't have to worry about war. The same may be true for all of your loved ones. You might not have to worry about paying any of your major bills, like sacrificing one to pay for another. Perhaps you're in a situation where if you get a flat tire or something else that could cost a large amount of money, you'll be okay, or at least it won't completely um, throw you into financial disarray. A lot of Americans aren't able to do that. Something like a flat tire could completely throw off whatever little they already have. So it's a way to reflect that because of the good deeds you did in the past, you have the vipaka, the fruit now. But things are impermanent. Things can change very quickly. So while we have the opportunity to practice, while you still have the opportunity to do so in an easier way, because if war came wherever you were, if some sort of crippling mental or physical illness arose, if a devastating financial impact happened, if a natural disaster came through and you had issues with your insurance, whatever it may be, maybe you die, you don't know what your next birth will be like. So, this reflection that I've been there, I've been in the hard times, can be a healthy way to motivate practice in times where we might not feel like it. I could end up in that hard time in this life. I could end up in that hard time in my next life. So while I have these good conditions that I am so grateful for, why don't I use them well? Why don't I practice the Dhamma well? And what that will mean will depend some on where you're at and what amount of depth that you're willing to practice with your current life conditions, but do the best you can with where you're at. And this also ties in something I mention all the time, the power of gratitude. It is so versatile. But I'll touch on that a little bit more when we get over to the Happiness Sutta. But I really love this so much since the Buddha starts with mentioning how beings have been wandering on for a beginningless amount of time and then bringing us back into where we presently are on that reflection of we've been there too, because that's very easy to forget. So the second paragraph of the sutta, why is that? Why have we also fallen on these hard times in the past? From an inconstruable beginning comes transmigration. A beginning point is not evident. No beings hindered by ignorance and fettered by craving are transmigrating and wandering on. Long have you thus experienced stress, experienced pain, experienced loss, swelling the cemeteries, enough to become disenchanted with all the fabricated things, enough to become dispassionate, enough to become released. And here the Buddha brings us back to the goal of Nibbana. How many times do you need to be in a situation where you're suffering greatly? Even if you're in a position now where things are okay, I'm sure things aren't perfect. Perhaps your partner bothers you, maybe your friends aren't supportive enough, or maybe you don't even have many local friends. Maybe you have to travel a long way to see anybody that you find nurtures you. Maybe your family's difficult. Maybe you're doing everything right, but the conditions just haven't come together for an old mental or physical cloud that you have to clear. That sucks. So even when things are good, which we'll touch on a little bit more in a moment, there is still this suffering that the Buddha mentions. Long have we experienced stress, experienced pain, experienced loss, swelling the cemeteries. And if you reflect on that enough, it is enough to become dispassionate about and help lead us in that direction of release, because these things are so unreliable. So the sutta that pairs with this, the next one, Samyutta Nikaya 15.12, is almost identical, but it's about happiness. So the Sukhita Sutta, happy. At Savatthi, there the Blessed One said, from an inconstruable beginning comes transmigration. A beginning point is not evident, though beings hindered by ignorance and fettered by craving are transmigrating and wandering on. When you see someone who is happy and well provided in life, you should conclude, we too have experienced just this sort of thing in the course of that long, long time. So everybody that's viewing, maybe you're one of the people that are on the hard time and you get to see somebody that is easeful. Like when you come here and visit the monastery, the neighborhood that it's in is upper middle class. So the first time I arrived here, I was like, wow, this is a fancy neighborhood. It was way different from what I was used to. So I knew that the people here, most of them anyway, I'm sure there's some people struggling, were pretty well off. And because I wanted to become a monk, that didn't preoccupy me. But there have been many people that visit here and talk quite extensively about how the neighborhood is. So that means it's a sticking point for them. You can also see this at work. Sometimes you work really, really, really hard, and despite all that hard work, you don't get recognized for it. But your coworker, who doesn't work as hard, but maybe is a little bit more charismatic or just gets along better with your boss or your manager or whatever the situation might be, they get the promotion. They seem to have no problems whatsoever. Their partner is great, their kids are great, their clothing and their hair is always perfect. They seem to have no financial troubles. They seem perfectly happy. So you can reflect on that person as well. I've been there. How many times do I need to be there in this life or other lives to get tired of this? It's just going to end. Someday, even if I do get into that position in this life, I'm going to die. So while, of course, it is good to get into a position, if possible, where you're comfortable and your needs are met enough to be content, there is an amount of security and safety that money can bring. But even if you get there, and even if you don't, either way, that is going to end, and you don't know when. So while putting in the conditions to try to create those sort of conditions, you don't have to stick to it. You don't have to use it as a point to beat yourself up like you're doing something wrong, unless you are. Then that's something you can also change. You can work on your conditions. And you can also look, what is it that I actually want that this person is happy about? A lot of the times, the answer isn't so much the conditions, it's the idea that we have of it. Especially if we are in a situation where things are actually okay, they're just not the way that we exactly want them to be. So, this sutta then ends in the same way as the other one. Why is that? From an inconstruable beginning comes transmigration. A beginning point is not evident, though beings hindered by ignorance and fettered by craving are transmigrating and wandering on. Long have you thus experienced stress, experienced pain, experienced loss, swelling the cemeteries, enough to become disenchanted with all fabricated things, enough to become dispassionate, enough to become released. So, some other reflections that are coming to my mind as well that can be tied to this sutta. There is another one. I think it's in the Anguttara Nikaya, but I'm not 100% sure. It might be in the Samyutta, where the Buddha says that suffering is a vital condition for faith. So the fact that you're here listening to this talk, either live or sometime in the future, means that you've probably had enough suffering to encourage you to try and make your life better, to try and become a better person, to deepen your spiritual practice, to see what you can do to change the conditions in your life. So while the suffering is painful and it sucks, if things were all good, if we had no motivation to practice, as you sometimes see with the higher sensual deva realms, then if you hear somebody talking about suffering, you'd be like, I don't know what you're talking about. I don't need to practice. Suffering isn't something that touches me. So that is a way to be grateful for the conditions, even if they're really hard, even if they really, really hurt, even if they have really deep wounds that are going to take a long time to heal. They brought you to the Dhamma. They brought you to a path where the goal is the ending of suffering. And it's something that you personally can do. The Buddha, he was a human, a very exceptional human, but he was a human. And you too are a human. That means you are just as capable as the Buddha. And even if it's something that doesn't come to fruition in this lifetime, the Buddha had many, 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 many lifetimes before he became the Buddha. He too had to set the conditions through all of those lives to become the historical Buddha that we have in this time period. So the effort that you put forward to practice well in this life because of that suffering, that's not going to go to waste. And you can tie that back to the Samvega contemplation that I had mentioned earlier. You had the conditions to find the Dhamma. And even if it's hard to practice, by doing good deeds, by practicing well, by being generous, by being patient, forgiving, by learning from your mistakes when you aren't those things, every single one is a step in the right direction towards Nibbana. As long as you are making progress, that is what matters the most. And without that suffering, it would be very difficult to make progress because you probably wouldn't be looking for the path anyway. It's not true for everybody, of course. There's some people that live very luxurious lives that are very devout Buddhists. But the vast majority of people had some sort of suffering that brought them to whatever religious tradition it is that they follow. So at this time, I think I will open it up to questions to see if there is anything anyone would like to ask. So, hello, Gregory. Hello, Susanta. Hello, Madeline. And hello, Manal. I currently don't see any questions, but I'll give it in a moment. And if not, then I think we'll conclude for today. If people don't know, by the way, if there are any suttas that you are interested in being gone over, you can send an email to the monastery and we'll add it to our ongoing list of suttas. Hello, Vivek. So I don't see any questions. So thank you to everyone who attended this morning for these 2 short suttas. I feel like they were pretty straightforward. So I tried to bring in reflections I had from when I was a layperson on how I would use them. I encourage you to in your life and in ways that you can apply it. How do you see yourself being jealous of others? And how do you see yourself being conceitful of others or towards yourself? Because that is this thing sometimes as well. So this is a very, very, very diverse, despite straightforward teaching. So may you all be well, may you all practice well and be well. May you all always have access to the Dhamma, affinity to practice the Dhamma, good conditions to practice the Dhamma, always be reborn where the Dhamma is available, and may you soon realize the threefold bliss. So until next time.